So, now I'm going to talk about these unconscious attitudes. And another way to describe it is types of reaction. So everyone reacts, everyone responds to the environment around them. And to be simplistic for just a moment, regarding authority, people tend to react in one of two ways, even if they may go back and forth from given situations. So it's not that there are types of people, but there are types of reaction, and some people tend to react a certain way most, if not all of the time, and other people may act in the opposite way, some or most of the time. Now, these two unconscious attitudes can be described as, and please understand this in a kind of a childish game format because it's a little easier to explain, that you've got two camps, and one of them is the lawbreakers, and the other camp are the law upholders. So let's talk about the lawbreakers first. Lawbreakers would represent the kind of personality or response where, when meeting a hostile authority, meeting an authority that will not give you what you want, the tendency is to argue or fight or protest. Now, immediately, this becomes a very, very individualistic process. So while I can tease about there being two camps, let me just go on for a second about how this one camp, the lawbreaker, immediately splinters into thousands and thousands of different reactions and personality types and ways of dealing with something. So a lawbreaker meets an authority that will not give them what they want, and they fight and rebel. The response can be very, very strong and negative from the authority figure. And so the lawbreaker, the response being that I want to protest this authority, the response may be, oops, not today, not now. So the initial impulse is to fight or to protest. But realistically, it perceives the authority figure as too large or too strong to continue the protest. They see the protest as dangerous or counterproductive. In another example, someone can protest and the authority figure simply gives in. Now, in the first example, you can still protest, but you'll protest based on whether you calculate winning that battle or not winning that battle. But the initial impulse was still to protest. In the second example, what a person might find is that if they put a lot of energy into their protest, they can overcome the resistance of authority figures. So depending on the personality of the individual and the personalities of the authorities in that case, or the situation, the culture, the climate in the household, you can have the same impulse and yet not see the same results. So some people who have an intuitive lawbreaker thought process at first can become very argumentative and forceful and aggressive because they see that as being able to overcome the resistance. And they're willing to go out and struggle against authority because they see it as productive to get what they want. On the other hand, you can have someone who tries to resist, finds the resistance or the authority figure a bit too strong, and so they pull back a bit and they calculate. So they will resist sometimes, but not others. That doesn't mean the original impulse is different. It means that the actions they take are different. Now, there are many, many, many other permutations of this. So I'm only describing that the lawbreaker, the original impulse to struggle and fight to get one's way, can splinter off into a multitude of manifested personalities and styles. But basically what the lawbreaker decides is that authority is, I wanted to use the word evil because that's where the lecture goes on this, but that's the extreme example. The lawbreaker decides that the authority does not know what it's doing and is not in its best interests. At the extreme, the lawbreaker would decide that authority is evil. But whether the first reaction is that authority is not the best authority and doesn't have the best answer, or whether it has already enlarged and says authority is evil, either way, once you decide that one road is bad or evil or even not what I want, the other road becomes a good alternative. So in the lecture, on a simplistic level, what the lawbreaker looks at is that authority is evil or bad, and getting its desires met is good. So whenever you decide that one thing is negative, its opposite becomes perceived as positive. So that's the lawbreaker.